what I've kind of learned is like everybody expects certain things from you. Everybody wants you to have something, including like my own mom. And finally, like letting go of what everyone else expected of me is what has allowed me to like really let my business scale and become who I'm most comfortable and content being.
What is going on, guys? On today's episode of the Collecting Keys podcast, we have Erin Helle, and it was such an awesome show. I just loved how it all came together and the stuff that we dove into on this. So first off, Dan wasn't on the show. He wasn't able to make the recording, so it's just me and Erin talking back and forth. But we really get into so many different parts of her life and how she scaled her business. And we focus a lot on how she balanced growing a real estate portfolio up to over 100 doors, also while balancing being a mom, raising kids. She was talking about doing renovations while she was pregnant. She's built out a realtor business, like a retail business as an agent. She's done so many different things in only 5 years. And the thing that I love about how she goes into it is she kind of like shifts away from some of the traditional views, I guess, or like the popular views that have become so huge right now about how, everything needs to be 100% family or 100% work. And she's talks about how she's mixed it all together in a way that has made it possible for her to live a really sort of all around awesome life. And I just love the way that she's approached just kind of like the different facets of things. And it's a really, really fascinating story. And, kind of as we get into the end of it, one of the other things that's super cool too is she talks about how the 100 doors that she's been able to accumulate, she didn't do anything crazy for them. She just like talks about her really basic model for finding all of these properties, and it's super repeatable. And if you can't do exactly what she's done, I don't know what to tell you, because it is literally as simple as can possibly get. So make sure you listen for the end there, because it's some really awesome knowledge bombs. Anyways, guys, please make sure that you reach out to her if you find her show enticing and interesting, and you want to connect with her more. That's why people come on and do these shows, is because they want you to engage with them, right? So don't be afraid to do that. And if you have anyone who's interested in real estate, being a mom, learning how to mix family life with business, this is a really awesome episode to share with that person. It's the easiest way for us to grow the show is if you share it with them. So I'm sure you have somebody in your circle who would be interested in that subject matter, and you should definitely share the show with them. Besides that, guys, it's a really awesome one today. Enjoy the show with Erin Helle. All right, we are here today with Erin Helle, based out of New York, and you are a long-term hold investor. You've done some wholesale deals. You have a YouTube channel. You were just telling me about the event that you were putting on in Las Vegas that you're expecting hundreds of people to come to. You have a whole bunch of stuff going on. So I'm super excited to have you on the show. You were referred by a previous guest that we've had, Shelby Johnson, on this show, and super excited just to hear what you have going on and how you got into so many different things in the real estate world, because happened really quick too. I think you've only been doing this for a couple of years. Is that right?
Yeah, and a total of 5 years now, and I've done a lot of things. And I think that's a lesson a lot of people can learn is try to stay focused, because you achieve success quicker and more productively when you do it. And I've learned that the hard way, and still continue to go down those rabbit holes occasionally. So,
well, that's all right. It keeps things interesting, and after a while, once you have a little bit of financial stability, you can have that flexibility to try different stuff. Right. So that's cool though. So let's start, I guess, from the beginning. I guess you've been relatively recent for you into real estate, but what were you doing before that, and how did real estate come onto your radar?
Yeah. So I was in the Army for my entire adult life until I was about 30. And I thought I'd stay in the military forever. My husband is still in, so we were both active duty at the same time. We had our first kid, and we knew my days were numbered. We just knew it was going to be a challenge for us to both continue our career and have a family and stay together, right? Like it's doable. Our branches didn't really overlap, so we weren't able to really keep our career on the same path. And so we knew if the only way we could continue our careers until 20 years would be if we committed to spending some time apart. And it just wasn't really an option for us. And we didn't realize like how quickly my career was going to end, because after I had my first daughter, we both got put on deployment orders. He was going to go to Iraq. I was going to go to Afghanistan when she was 6 months old.
Oh,
And
geez.
yeah, I just couldn't even fathom leaving her. Like, it was hard enough for me to take her to daycare. So I did not owe the Army anything. I completed my service obligation. He did owe a little bit for some school that he went to. So I submitted my request for resignation and I got out like 5 months later, which is a crazy quick turnaround for that type of a transition. Usually it takes like 18 months to retire. It takes like typically a year to get out of the military. And I did it in 5 months with a
Nice.
newborn and a deployed husband. And it was just a whirlwind. And I didn't even have a chance to really process what I was doing or what I wanted to do next. And I started looking at like full-time employment options. I was looking a lot into project management because it really kind of overlapped with what I did in the military, what I was qualified to do. But when I really like looked at the options between like an hour commute each way, and we knew we wanted to have more kids, and I just couldn't see how I could do that and continue to build my family while my husband was deployed and, still moving with the military anytime they asked us to move. So I said, I can be a stay-at-home mom and just sort of bide my time until they go to school and it'll be fine. And
Mm-hmm.
it was not fine. I had a really, really hard time with it. I was a terrible stay-at-home mom. Luckily, my daughter was an infant, like she, couldn't even talk, but I just didn't enjoy it. I wasn't engaged with her in a way that I am now. And
Mm-hmm.
I just, kind of went through this period of like no self-worth, no purpose, no network. I think that was the biggest thing I lost. I lost my network overnight. And I went from hanging out with like all these professional military minded people to suddenly staying out with a bunch of stay at home moms who wanted to homeschool. And
Mm-hmm.
I just felt inadequate. I just felt like I
Yeah.
was not made, didn't feel like I was made to do that. And I just, instead of like realizing I have other options, I just sort of felt guilty about it for a long time.
Yeah.
And I considered investing. Well, I considered, I think, flipping more than anything because I just was intrigued by construction. I'd always been around construction as a kid. My family owns construction companies. And so I think that's what drew me to it initially. So fast forward to like one of my first deals, I essentially flipped a house myself. I was pregnant with my second child, ended up laying floors at 8 months pregnant because I couldn't find someone else to do it in a timely manner. And I was like on this, I had this deadline of a due
Yeah.
date. I wanted the project to be done. So I ended up doing a ton of the work myself, one for a couple reasons. I didn't have a team. I didn't have enough money. I didn't realize that like contractors weren't just going to like come out the next day and finish the job in 3 days. Like they're like, yeah, we'll put you on the agenda for 10 weeks from now. So I just didn't have that kind of time. So anyway, learned a ton through that. And what I realized in that process, I did enjoy it. I do enjoy working with my hands and I like flips, but the way that I did that one isn't really scalable.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started looking into other things and realized that there's so much more to real estate and kind of pursued anything and everything I could, tried like all the different strategies, have done flips, have done bursts, have done turnkey. And I kind of learned in this process, we own almost 100 doors now. There was actually like a couple days where we owned over 100 doors. We closed on 8 units and then like 2 days later closed on 5. So I think we're down to like 97 doors. But
Yeah.
anyway, pursued a bunch of different strategies. And we're now kind of really comfortable with the long-term buy and hold, long-term tenants. Not a big fan of the short-term rental model. Not a big fan of the active flipping. Just like to buy and like to ride out the rentals.
Awesome. I love it. You covered a ton in there. So I want to do a deep dive into a couple of things. But first off, if it's cool, I'd like to go back and talk about your situation with being a stay-at-home mom and coming to that realization because I guess from my background, I'm in my early 30s, my wife's 30. I've entertained the idea of having kids. We don't have any kids yet, but like the whole parenting thing and just kind of like the, I don't know, general views around how you're supposed to do it is something that we struggle with, and what you're talking about right there. I appreciate you sharing that first off, because I feel like there's such a reoccurring stigma that as the female, you should kind of like want to be a stay-at-home mom. And there's so many women out there that literally is their goal. But, you're saying that obviously was not the case for you. So I guess did you know that you were going to struggle with it? Like, did you kind of like have a feeling, or was that like a big shock once you sort of went down that path and you realized how much you struggled with it?
I think it was more of a shock than I kind of realized. I think for the most part, I didn't really process it,
Yeah.
like any of it. And I think that I just sort of thought that, my motherly instinct, or like,
Yeah.
who I was made to be. I'm saying this like kind of facetiously, because I've learned through this process, through, having kids and now raising two daughters. And especially, we just moved away from Tennessee. So raising two daughters in the South. I'm from New York. So it's just sort of different. And what I've kind of learned is like, everybody expects certain things from you. Everybody wants you to have something, including like my own mom.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, like letting go of what everyone else expected of me is what has allowed me to like really let my business scale and become who I'm most comfortable and content being. And I feel really compelled to like having two little girls and showing them that they can do and be whoever they want to be. Because I feel like my whole life I've been told, you're supposed to do this, you're supposed to want this is what you were made to do. And then I kept getting myself in situations where I was like, this just doesn't feel right. And even motherhood, it's such an interesting like dichotomy. It's like moms should want to stay home and should enjoy being home with their kids, but then you do that and everyone turns their nose down at you, like
Mm-hmm.
you're just a stay-at-home mom. You probably don't even have a high school diploma, and that's the way that they treat you. And being a military spouse is like a whole nother element of that. Everyone just
Yeah.
assumes that I just stay home and do nothing all day,
Mm-hmm.
which I would love to be able to do that more than anything in the whole wide world. I think that women or people who are able to stay home with their kids and enjoy it and are able to be present, I would do anything to be that person, because I would love for my kids to have that, but it's just not who I am. And I've learned that that's okay.
Yeah.
So, kind of like buck that status quo. Like whatever people are telling you life should look like as a parent, or what you're supposed to do, none of it matters. What matters is that your
Yeah.
kids see you doing what makes you happy, and they see you build something that you care about. And that's what they're going to grow up to be, like secure, healthy adults, which I can't
Yeah.
necessarily say I was like
Yeah.
in my early 30s.
Yeah, right. No, and I mean, and that makes sense. And, I imagine there's a lot more women out there who share that same sort of viewpoint, but they don't feel like they can, really express that. And especially in the military world. So I used to live outside JBLM in Tacoma. And there, you could always tell the military wives who liked being stay-at-home moms, the ones who didn't, because the ones who didn't would always be getting into like every pyramid scheme. They would always like have some sort of random hustle they'd be doing. They'd always be trying to organize stuff that didn't always make sense, trying to give them some sort of purpose, right? And I think that's one way that it takes hold. And I think with younger people, so like people in their mid-20s and that sort of thing, what you're going to start to see is more and more women not wanting to have kids because they don't want to be given that, I need to be like a fully present, mom stigma image, right? Like they want more from their life than that.
Yeah.
No, that's interesting. So I guess before we move on from that topic, what does your relationship look like with your kids now? Like, do you include them in your day-to-day work? Do they go to traditional school? Like what does that look like?
Yeah, so they definitely go to school. I'm the
Yeah.
last person who will ever be a homeschool teacher, just because it's not in my personality. But my little one she's going to preschool every day, but just for half day. And then my oldest I have two girls. My oldest is 7. So she's going into second grade. She actually starts tomorrow. But I involve them. So they're actually on the payroll. They each work 10 hours a week for me. And what that looks like
Nice.
right now is, you can't see it in my office, but I have like lanyards all over the place for my next event. And they've been putting them together for me. Like they stick the name tag in there and they attach it. And it's all color coded based on like VIPs and the team. And they've been doing that and they really enjoy doing it. And they've taken a ton of pride in it. And every time someone comes over, they like show them all these lanyards that they make. So it's cool to see them like excel in that sort of like with responsibility. And so I love that I'm able to challenge them and like bring them along with me in that sense. And then I just try to, share with them as much as I can about how what I'm doing is building something for their future. It's something that they can have. And they don't get it at all.
Yeah.
But, I think they do see me working on this, by myself, for myself. And I emphasize to them all the time because they'll be like, oh, you're on another phone call, or do you really have to do another meeting? And I'm like, babe, this is what pays for a Disney trip. This is what lets us go on a Disney cruise. Like, some people can't do this ever, and we do it every year. Like, and so I emphasize that to them. And we've had conversations about it. And I will just ask them, like, would you rather that I stayed at home and just was there with you all the time? Or, I keep doing this, and then we can go to Starbucks. And there's a Starbucks like a half a mile from my house. And I'm ashamed to say that we go like 3 times a week. And my kids go to Starbucks, which kind of bugs me. It's just a convenience thing. But they'll say all the time, they're like, we would rather that you work so we can have these experiences and do these fun things. And so I think it's just important to be open and honest and have those conversations, because I learn so much through them and just hearing their perspective, and it's interesting.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love that. I mean, one of my very unpopular opinions probably is that I do think we will have a generation with its own kind of issues from this massive increase in the ever-present parents that we have right now, where there's so many people that are my age, that have kids or are having young kids, and they're obsessed with being available 24/7 for their kids. And I understand the reasoning behind that, or like what they think, why they think it's a good idea. But in my mind, you're just going to end up with these kids that are fully dependent on you. And one of the things that really bothers me is when you see like this, it's like always like on a billboard. It's a quote that gets passed around social media all the time. It's like, no one will remember you. In 20 years, no one will remember you working nights except for your kids. And I'm like, I mean, I guess if you do it every single day, but if you do it for like once a week, or you do it for like a quarter out of that entire 20-year span, but that allows you to have a whole different life for your family, they're also going to be able to acknowledge that. And even though maybe when they're 5, they don't understand, when they're 12, 13, 15, that's going to instill a level of like discipline that they are going to be able to see, and like work ethic. Whereas if you're just always available to go to every single baseball practice, it just doesn't make sense to me. I don't know.
Yeah.
But people will die on that hill arguing with me on that. So
Yeah.
I try to
Yeah.
stay away
But
from
you know
most of the
what?
time.
I think the way you got to look at it is like, so I think I totally see that too. And I think this, like the kids that are my kids' age will be more secure emotionally. But you're right. Like, I have a bunch of like mommy's helpers that come over. They're like 13 and 14-year-old girls who, no joke, cannot make a box of mac and cheese. Like, I have to teach them how to make a box of mac and cheese. And interestingly, like my 7-year-old will have to help them with it. She can do it better than they can. And I blame their parents, right? Like, they're like too dependent on their parents. Like, your 13-year-old needs to be able to make themselves a box of mac and cheese. But anyway, I agree. But I think that so I come from a family so my husband and I ended up in the same place, right? Like we both went to West Point. We both, out of high school, we both served in the military, but our upbringings couldn't have been more different. His parents went to every single sporting event. His parents were super present, and mine were not at all. And he went to one of the worst public schools in the country. And I went to one of the top private schools in New York State, which is pretty good for schools. And so, but we ended up in the same place, and we still have, right? Like, we still have issues, like they're different issues, but we still have issues. And so I think my sister reminds me of this all the time. She's a social worker. She's like, you are going to mess your kids up no matter what. So, let that guilt go. Like, everyone has their own issues that they deal with. Like, she's like, just accept that now and just be who you want to be as a parent. And I've always like kind of found comfort in that. Like, I'll have times where I feel like I'm overly like available for my kids. And then other times where I'm like, I feel like I need to just go stare at a wall for an hour and my kid is screaming and I can't even engage. And then I feel guilty for that. But I mean, we're human, right? Like,
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Yeah. Love it. Man, lots of family talk on the Collecting Keys podcast. I think that's a fun. I appreciate you diving into that with me. That's
I do bring it up. Like you said, you don't hear about it a lot. I think a lot of women, particularly women, feel this way. And I think we do not talk about it enough. We don't. Like, every time I bring it up, people are like, thank you so much for bringing it up. And that's why I do, because this is something I struggle with every single day. And the more I talk about it, the more I see everyone else is struggling with it. And it might not make it easier, it might not make it better, but it is nice to know that we're not alone in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a big thing as you sort of get into the public sphere, you start doing these different podcasts, putting on events, you very quickly realize that so many people are similar just with their life circumstances and those sort of things and what they're trying to figure out. Even though it can feel like you're alone when you're going through stuff, that's simply not the case. Really? Awesome. So let's dive back into your real estate. So you started this not that long ago and you got up to over 100 doors. Like, that's pretty rad. So what was that process like? I mean, first off, how were you finding and funding all of these properties?
Well, finding deals when I first got started was so easy compared to how it is now. And I know a lot of like aspiring investors that are just struggling right now with interest rates and availability of deals and just sort of this like trepidatious attitude about investing in general. But it wasn't like that when I got started. And so I didn't realize, one, that I lived in a great investor market in Clarksville, Tennessee, and two, just how great of a time it was to invest. So I had all those things working in my favor. And honestly, like, I think I came into it from such a place of like struggle of like just feeling inadequate and unworthy that like I was like, I'm going to commit to this and I'm just refusing to quit. And it was that like ruthlessness that just let me achieve the success that I was able to like continually scale it. And I remember like at the beginning of COVID, I was under this renovation, really expensive flip in Nashville, in a really affluent neighborhood in Nashville. And my contractor just did a terrible job. I didn't really know because I was living in California. And it was just a nightmare. And I thought it was going to be the end. I just couldn't, like, I had nothing left, like no more money to cover the $4,800 mortgage payment. And I was just so stressed out. And I finally got through that property and I sold it somehow, like was able to float myself and not lose anything because of it. And I just learned through that process, and sort of every single struggle that I've come to so far is like, you can't learn in that same way, like until you go through those struggles. That is where the true learning happens. And once you overcome those challenges, like I now know there's not a single deal that's going to deter me from closing, like, or from making the right decision for me and my portfolio, just because of the experiences that I've had. And even if I do make a bad investment, which of course I do, I invested with an automation company about a year and a half ago. I gave them $50,000 for a truck, an 18-wheeler, and then they just declared bankruptcy. So I'll never see that $50,000. So I lost that money, right? And a couple years ago, I would have been devastated. But when I was closing that deal and signing the paperwork, I had this like kind of bad feeling about it. And like, I'm like, should have trusted my gut. And that's sort of something that I keep learning over and over again, is like, your gut tells you something for a reason. And I've continually make that same mistake, but I feel like I'm getting a little bit better every time. And like, you do lose stuff. You do lose on certain investments. It's risky. You can't win everything. You can't win them all. But I think that the more volume you have and the more experience, you just keep getting better and better at it. And you just, it just keeps scaling. I can't really explain how it happens.
Yeah. So I guess your primary lead source, though, then it sounds like, is it mostly on the market? That's where you've been finding stuff, or have you been doing direct to seller stuff too?
Yeah, when I started, it was mostly on market deals. Actually, most of my investments throughout the years have been MLS deals. And I'm a realtor and I have a team of realtors. And a lot of them, some of them are like wholesalers as well. So I honestly just get deals from everywhere. I've gotten deals from my private money lenders. I think it's just important that whatever you're trying to do, you share that with everybody. You share it with your friends, your family, your spouse, your sister, all of your professional contacts, because suddenly, we call it like manifestation, like it just sort of starts coming to fruition. But like the more you talk about it and the more you put it out there, the more you're opening your eyes to those opportunities and those possibilities. And then they're just all over the place. So, I honestly like can't tell you where they all came from, but like everywhere, literally everywhere. Like sometimes they'll just
Yeah.
show up to my inbox from a wholesaler. I'm like, never heard of this guy, no clue where he got my email. Other times I just randomly see something on Zillow one night when I'm just like sitting on the couch. And there's times where I'm like, man, I didn't even know I was looking for this. Or I'll say like, I suddenly have this idea for something in my head and then I just see it everywhere. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Nice. So no, that's awesome. So you'd be a great buyer for wholesalers that are out there that are listening to this. This is the kind of person that you want to be buying your properties, right? And it's funny because there's so many. That's one of the biggest questions that we get with wholesalers that come on this show is, how do I find good buyers? And that's a lot of the same principles. And if you can find someone like you in that market, you're a great person to sell properties to.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. So just networking effect. That's super effective way to start finding deals. How did you pay for all of them though? Because like, I guess, what's the makeup of all your doors? Do you have like a big multifamily in there that's pumping up the numbers, or is it all a bunch of single families?
No, I think we've got a 10 unit and a 12 unit.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's all a bunch of like small multifamily,
Yeah.
duplexes. So we still have a handful of single family homes. The only reason we haven't sold them is because the interest rates are like ridiculous, like 2s and
Mm-hmm.
3%. So
Yeah.
once the rates come back down, we might consider selling those. But yeah, duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes. That's kind of where I feel most comfortable. And then in terms of funding, honestly, like I've never done a sub two deal, but I've done a couple seller financing deals.
Mm-hmm.
I've self-directed my IRA.
Okay.
I have a Roth and a traditional IRA. My husband has a Roth IRA. All of those are self-directed and invested in syndications.
Okay.
So we just are, essentially like a limited partner in a 5 unit or a 12 unit,
Mm.
stuff like that. And then, but the rest of them, I've done a couple BRRRR deals. And the way that I do my BRRRRs is hard money on the front side, refinance it with private money because we're pretty limited to private money at this point. And then
Mm-hmm.
the rest of them, I just do 20% down with
Nice.
25% down with private money. And that's kind of where I just actually had a conversation today with like an aspiring investor who wants to get away from partners. She's ready to just scale on her own. And she said, I told her like I exclusively use private money. And then because I don't have the typical income, my tax return is like bananas, as is hers because she's a notary and has a couple other businesses. But I I really like private money because it's just sort of has this like impersonal element. It's very unemotional. It's the
Mm-hmm.
underwriting has to do with the property and the performance of the property. And then I don't need partners to take it down. And then I don't have to ask somebody, when the property manager calls and says, the toilet's running, do you want to replace it or repair it? I just make the decision on my own. I don't have to run it by anybody. I don't have to like
Yeah.
validate anybody's long-term plan. Like it's just, that's where I like to be on my own, making my own decisions. And our philosophy is always our being mine and my husband's is always just add value to the property. Like we don't plan on selling anything ever unless we have to or have a great opportunity elsewhere. So we always want to improve rather than just, slap some duct tape on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good old fashioned real estate right there. That's always been our MO too, is to buy stuff with that value add potential. And then it allows you to actually do BRRRR deals, right? It's not always just about having to find turnkey properties at a discount, which a lot of people try to do. And I appreciate you sharing that comment about private money as well, because this is one of the biggest, I would say, like positions that newer investors come in with that I think is a bad place to be, where they think that they need to bring in these partners on like everything because they don't want to get loans, they don't want to do whatever. And I think it's because they feel like it's less scary if they have a quote unquote partner. So what they'll do is they'll find a person that has money that'll fund the deal for them. And they're like, yeah, we're going to split it 50-50. It's like, that's really expensive money. Like,
Right.
honestly, if you look at it,
Right.
you can go find, if you want to get a second position loan for the down payment, find someone that you're going to pay like a fixed interest rate or something on that. But other than that, go get private money or get a hard money loan because you're going to increase your net worth so much and you're going to be the 100% owner and you're not going to have someone who feels like they own you because they funded this whole deal and they're a 50% owner.
Yeah.
And when I hear about that, it always seems to be with younger investors. I'm pretty sure it's because like there's some savvy folks with money that are just trying to take advantage of the young guys out there. But it's such a reoccurring pattern that comes up over and over and over again. And it's a really dangerous place for people to get
Yeah.
started.
Well, and it's the podcast too. Like a lot of these
Mm-hmm.
podcasts are like the headlines are like, newbie investor buys $200 in their first year. And
Yeah.
it's like, that's like the sexy stuff. Right. And so people
Yeah.
think that that's the way to scale. And that is the way that I did it. I did 18 doors in my, or 19 doors in my first 18 months. And that was like the headline of all the podcasts at the time. Right. And what I learned though is when people get into crazy situations, they get desperate and they do crazy
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And I'm to the point now in my life where, as a mom to two kids, like I don't want to be involved in other people's shit. I don't want to be involved in their
Mm-hmm.
drama and their financial stresses. And so I just have removed myself from it. So, for me, it was like a means to an end and it did work. But I think like back to what you were saying about the being a good buyer for a wholesaler, but then also like the private money thing. I think we tend as people to just overcomplicate everything, and we're always talking about these systems and these processes. But like real estate is so ridiculously simple. It's
Mm-hmm.
figure out what your goal is, find a property that accommodates that, fund it, close it, repeat. Like it is that simple. And so if any of you add multiple steps to any of those steps, you're just adding more steps, which is just reducing your chances of getting to closing. It's just increasing your time, increasing your stress level, complicating everything. And it doesn't have to be that way. So I think this is like sort of the overarching theme with everything we're talking about. Once you figure out what you want for your life, manifest that into what a portfolio would look like. Like, here's your life plan. Here's how a portfolio can accommodate that. And then as soon as you find that deal, you make the offer and you figure out how to close it. And I
Yeah.
think that's what makes me a good buyer. And granted, I am the most like left-brained, logical person you'll probably ever meet. I do not make emotional decisions, which is really good for business, not so great for my personal life. But,
Yeah.
I think that if you don't naturally do that and you have a tendency to add emotion to it, then you either have to find yourself a mentor or, a partner in some version that can help you make sure that what your activity lines up with your goals. And I think that's where most people just get stuck and never make it past.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you say to the new investor that hears that and they say, well, Erin, that worked for you because you started back when it was easy, but now it's way too competitive and there's no way that I could ever do the same thing.
I'll just tell them, I'm glad that people have that attitude because it's less competition for me.
There you go.
But the true investors did not stop investing. Nobody,
Mm-hmm.
nobody who was like investing well and doing a good job 2 years ago, 3 years ago, just like suddenly sidelined themselves. And I think
Yeah.
anybody that says, "Oh, I'm not buying right now because of the market," I'm super skeptical of them, because if you believe in real estate, like the concept of that is irrelevant to market cycles.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like you believe like you just now is the time to buy. You're right. It is more competitive and it is harder. There's just less inventory and there's less money, but there's also significantly less competition because so many investors have sidelined themselves and told themselves now is not the right time to buy. So I'm like,
Yeah.
I'll just tell them like it is. Like, oh, good for you. I'll buy up your share then.
Yeah. I love it. And it's always such a funny thing. So we have our instant investor coaching program that we do, or like our group mastermind, and people inquire about it and they always say like, so what do you guys do that's different that makes your system better? And I say nothing. Like we do jump shot and bounce pass basketball. We do the most basic game. We just do it with consistency and with scale. And as a result, it's turned into something that we do better than everybody else just because we've been doing it for longer the same way. And what I always warn people is if you're going to get into this business, don't get cute. Anyone that tells you that they have like some fancy new secret thing that's going to make it so much better, they're literally just trying to take your money and they have no track record of success. That's why they're trying to sell you on something that sounds too good to be true, because it probably
It
is.
is.
But so
Yep.
many people just look right past that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's awesome. That's good stuff, Erin. Let's talk about this event that you're putting on, or I guess this other, I don't know, is this like another business that you're doing as well on top of the real estate, or is this just like a one-time event that you're
No,
putting on
so
right now?
it's the probably the first of an annual event. So I've done a couple different conferences. The first one I did was for women about 3 years ago. I just did a women's investor conference because there was none. There weren't any that existed. There's more now, and there's a lot of virtual ones too, which I think is awesome. But getting all these women in the same room and realizing like we're all struggling with the same stuff, like we're all going through this same thing, and like the camaraderie that came out of that and the vibe in the room was life changing. And I'm sure for them, but like for me it changed my life. And so I love to bring people together for meetups. I do an investor meetup. I did it on a monthly basis in Tennessee. I haven't set it up here in New York yet, but I just, I never made any money off of that per se. But it's a great way to continue to build your network, a great way for me as a realtor to find other realtors to join my team, buyers and sellers and stuff like that. So, anyway, this one, I had this idea a long time ago and I just was kind of too afraid to put it in place because there's a couple other events that are kind of like it. And I was afraid that people were going to think that I was trying to like steal their audience or steal their concept. But I went to a lot of these other events. They're military events. They're for veterans, active duty military people. But I just felt like so many of them missed the mark. Like one of them, it was just a total pitch fest. Like the whole entire time, it was just listening to these sponsors share their products. And this other time, it was like a smaller one. And I feel like all the attendees were there to do nothing more than like get you to invest in their product. And it just
Mm-hmm.
left a really bad taste in my mouth. So I was like, I want to set up an educational event for investors looking to get started or looking to scale. And I want to teach them how to like develop an attitude of abundance. I think that's step one. It's like, get your mind right, get ready to set some big goals. And then let's spend the rest of the weekend putting those goals into action and coming up with a blueprint to go from where you are now to where you want to be in X amount of time. And then just surround yourself with other people who are trying to do the same thing. We can all elevate ourselves together and it'll be awesome. So that's what we're doing. We have some breakout sessions. We're doing all the strategies: single family investing, house hacking, multifamily, wholesaling, flipping, lending, all kinds of different stuff. Like any strategy you can pursue in real estate, we're going to have a breakout session for it. We even set up like a scholarship program too for some veterans who couldn't afford the ticket. And it's in September in Las Vegas, and it's going to be awesome. And it's been a beast to put together, but I've enjoyed it. And I think that the event, now that we're like 16 days out, I'm just like so excited to get out there and just kind of hit it out of the park and be around people. I just am amazed at how you're like my success just somehow continues to increase just by surrounding myself with other people who are successful. It's like
Yeah.
unreal how that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's the event called? I don't think you said
It's,
that in there.
it's called the Financial Freedom Summit.
Financial Freedom Summit. Awesome. I love it. That sounds cool. And it'll hopefully be annual as well. So I think that by the time this episode comes out, that'll have already gone on, but you guys should definitely check it out for next year. Awesome. Well, lots of good stuff, Erin. I appreciate you coming on and sharing all this. We're starting to wind down the show here. So we're going to go into our end of show questions, which are the same with every show. And they give a little bit of an insight into some of the things that you've experienced as an investor and also some guidance you can have for other people. So First off, the number one question, which is always the show favorite, is what is your craziest real estate investing story? And this can be a big win, it can be a big loss, it can be a crazy tenant, it can be a crazy transaction, whatever you got.
Oh my gosh. I have so much. I think every single transaction comes with a story, but I think the one that sticks out, there's probably a handful of transactions I've had where I'm like, oh, well, that was easy.
Yeah.
But the one that sticks out, I think, is just when I was really super pregnant with my second kid and like literally like caulking a bathtub and laying vinyl plank in the floor on the floor. And my first kid came early. She came 3 weeks early. And I thought my second one was going to too, and she didn't, luckily. But yeah, just having that like time pressure. And my contractors, who I still work with to this day, so that was 5 years ago, they are doing a flip for me right now, or rent a bird for me right now. And they would show up every morning, and I think they just were afraid I was like going to go into labor in the house like at any time.
Yeah.
So every day they'd get there, they'd be like, okay, you're still pregnant. Like, we're doing this. So
Yeah.
anyway.
Right. That's awesome. That's pretty hardcore. That's like a great thing that you can talk to people that are, afraid to get into it or worried about time or their own situation. Like, well, what's your excuse? Like, you are
Yeah.
probably in one of the most challenging states of human that you could be in to be tackling that. Did you have like renovation experience at that point, or were you just figuring it out while also being pregnant?
I was really just figuring it out. My dad had built a couple of his own homes, and he was an iron worker for years and years. So like he could do all of it. But he wasn't like licensed in Tennessee. We didn't know any
Yeah.
of the code. Like he ended up doing some of the electrical. And we were like just hoping that the inspector would pass us. But yeah, anyway, I had no experience. I mean, granted, a lot of it was easy. Like we hired out. The plumbing was completely done. And then he
Yeah.
did some of the electrical with the oversight of a licensed electrician. But then otherwise it was like pretty cosmetic.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh yeah, I'll paint this house myself. 3 days later, like trying to paint the ceiling, I'm like, this is
Worst.
worse. This is worth like $500 an hour. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a huge learning curve.
Yeah. That's so funny. Everyone, when they start to tackle that, they have like that one task that they're like, I'm never doing that again. For me, it's painting for sure. I
Totally
hate
painted.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The first couple of houses that we did, I had never used any sort of like power tool or never done any sort of work on a house ever. And then I decided I was going to be a real estate investor, and we're going to we're going to renovate this house. And it was literally me and my wife, like school of YouTube. Like, oh, this is how you hang drywall. This is how you install a shower surround. This is how you do all the things. And, we just did it long enough to be able to get the process done, make some money off of it. And then we learned that it took us way longer and we'd be better off just hiring people and then
Totally.
focusing on the next transaction. So,
Yep.
no, that's awesome. All right. So next question, what is the number one tip you would have for either a new investor looking to get started or a small time investor looking to take the business to the next level?
Yeah. Get really, really honest with yourself, really, really clear on what your goals are, and then ruthlessly pursue them. Don't stop until you achieve them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great one. All right. And then last question, where can people find you, follow you, and reach out to you if you'd like them to do so?
Yeah, so my website is bcglobalinvestments.com. The events are on bcglobalevents.com. And then I'm all over social media, the Erin Helle. On Facebook, I'm just at the Erin Helle. On Instagram, I think I'm at the Erin Helle _ investor coach. And then on LinkedIn, it's just Erin Helle.
Perfect. Right on. And if you guys want to see those, you can see them down in the show notes here below the show. But Erin, thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. You have a awesome story, and I appreciate the deep dive into family life as well. I think that's an interesting topic that I'm excited to hear what the listeners think about that.
Yep. Thank you so much for
Awesome.
having me.
Absolutely. So awesome, guys. Well, hopefully you enjoyed this show with Erin Helle. And if you didn't, I don't know what to tell you, because that was a great deep dive into a whole realm of real estate. And she is obviously an A player. You can tell by how she talks, the confidence about how she talks about the deals, and the nonchalant nature about how she talks about the 100 plus doors that she owns. I mean, that doesn't happen without some real hard work and some real gusto. So go ahead and give her a follow. Believe it or not, people do these shows because they want you to reach out to them and they want you to follow along with what they're doing. So don't be afraid to hop on Instagram, hop on her website, shoot her a little hello, let her know what you're doing, and I'm sure she would be happy to connect with you. And besides that, guys, please share this with anyone who might find this interesting. If they have a slight interest in real estate, investing, business, or anything else in between, this is definitely a great one for them to get started with collecting keys. And we appreciate you all, and we'll talk to you all next week.